Hey there. Welcome to our channel Sleeping Pill, where stories drift softly into the night. I'm Michael, your companion on this slow journey into sleep. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let this gentle story carry you towards sleep. Tonight we drift to the edge of the sea, to a place where fog eats the horizon and time itself seems to hold its breath. You can almost smell the salt before I even start describing it. That sharp, damp scent that sticks to your clothes and your thoughts. The waves here don't crash so much as sigh, as if they're tired of being waves. And somewhere beyond that mist, there's a tall white lighthouse, old enough to remember shipwrecks no one else does. You probably won't survive this one. Not because it's scary, but because halfway through, your eyelids will start to weigh more than a full anchor. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me your city and local time in the comments. It's oddly comforting knowing where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The boat rocks gently beneath you as you arrive in the coastal village. The world feels muted. Gulls cry somewhere above. The water slaps against rotten wood, and the evening light turns everything the color of old postcards. You step off the pier, and your boots sink slightly into the wet sand. Around you, life exists in low volume. Fishermen mending nets, a cat stretching under a boat, a child chasing nothing in particular. You're not sure why you came. Maybe for the air or the quiet or that restless ache that city lights can't fix. The locals glance at you, not unfriendly, just curious. A stranger here is as rare as a calm tide in storm season. They nod in acknowledgement but don't speak much. Words in this place are like matches, used sparingly only when needed. At the far end of the bay stands the lighthouse, tall, pale, slightly crooked at the top like it's bowing to the sea. You're told it's still manned by a keeper who never left. Even after the world moved on from oil lamps and handwritten logs, he lives there with his wife, someone says, pointing with a chin rather than a hand. She doesn't talk. You think they mean doesn't talk much, but they don't. They mean she truly doesn't speak. Not a word in years. The road leading to the lighthouse is narrow, bordered by salt-stained grass and scattered shells. The air thickens with the smell of brine and iron. Each step closer, you can feel the rhythm of the waves sinking with your heartbeat. When you reach the small cottage beneath the tower, the door is already open. Inside, you see the keeper, tall, lean, face carved by weather and waiting. He greets you with a nod, no smile, just a silent permission to enter. His clothes are simple. Wool sweater, rolled sleeves, trousers smelling faintly of oil and wind, and there, near the window, sits his wife, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. She turns slightly, her eyes meeting yours. Calm, soft, almost apologetic. You nod awkwardly, unsure whether to speak or wave. She nods back, and somehow that's enough. The room hums with quiet work, ticking clock, gentle scrape of a chair, faint hiss of the sea outside. You take a seat and feel the stillness press against your skin. The silence isn't heavy. It's kind, like the room itself has decided to protect it. You watch her move, setting the kettle, slicing bread, pouring tea, all with a rhythm that suggests she's been doing it this way forever. When the keeper joins, the two move around each other like dancers who forgot the music, but still remember the steps. As night thickens, you notice how the lighthouse beam sweeps through the window every few seconds, a slow pulse of light and shadow. Each rotation feels like a heartbeat, a steady, wordless reminder that something out there needs saving, even if it's just ships you'll never see. Later, when you lie down on the small cot they offered, the sea murmurs outside. You can't sleep yet, though. You're too aware of the rhythm of their quiet, of how silence here feels not like emptiness but language. You close your eyes, and for a second, you could swear you hear a whisper. Or maybe it's just the wind brushing through the cracks. Either way, you're already caught in their world, a world where love doesn't need words and light has to keep burning, even when no one's watching. Morning arrives as a pale gray wash across the windows. The sea looks half asleep, stretching itself in slow silver ripples. You step outside, rubbing your arms against the chill, and the first thing you see is him, the lighthouse keeper, standing by the rocks, his coat flapping in the wind like it's part of him. He's looking toward the horizon where fog and sky are one unbroken sheet of white. You call out a small good morning, but the wind steals it before it reaches him. He doesn't turn, only lifts his hand in a faint gesture. Not quite a wave, more like he's acknowledging that yes, morning exists, and yes, you're part of it now. By the time you join him, he's already back to his work, checking the oil, cleaning the glass, recording the weather in a notebook so worn it's more patchwork than paper. You notice how deliberate his movements are, how nothing he does is rushed. There's a sense that every small action, from polishing the lens to folding a rag, carries weight. You ask him how long he's been here. He looks at you squinting as if the answer might be hidden somewhere in the mist. Too long, he says. And it's the first full sentence you've heard from him. His voice is low, gravelly, like it hasn't had much practice. You try to smile, but he's already back to work. When you look toward the cottage, you see her, the silent wife framed in the window. She's sweeping, though the floor hardly needs it. Her movements are soft, like she's afraid to disturb the air. Every few seconds, she glances toward the tower, not worried, just watching. It's the kind of gaze that holds years inside it. Later, when you return inside for breakfast, the smell of fresh bread fills the small kitchen. She sets a plate before you along with tea that's far too strong but somehow perfect for this place. She doesn't meet your eyes, and you don't push conversation. Instead, you listen to the gulls outside, to the rhythmic clank of the keeper's tools, to the faint creak of the tower as it sways with the wind. There's a notebook beside her on the table, small brown leather, edges softened from years of being opened and closed. You notice writing on the topmost page, neat slanted handwriting. Just a few words. Weather fair, lantern steady, tide whispering louder tonight. You're not sure if it's her journal or his, but it feels personal, sacred almost, so you don't ask. She notices you looking, though, and for the first time you catch a flicker of amusement in her eyes, like she's used to people being curious about her silence. The day unfolds like a lullaby played on repeat. The sea rolls, the gulls circle, and the air tastes faintly of salt and old stories. The keeper climbs the stairs of the lighthouse while you follow, every step creaking under your feet. From the top, the view steals your breath. endless gray blue, stretching in every direction, the world both vast and small at once. He points to the horizon. Used to be more ships, he says quietly. Now it's mostly just fog and memories. You nod, though he's not really asking for agreement. He's thinking aloud, maybe talking to himself after years of not needing anyone else to listen. His words trail off and the wind fills the silence. You can almost hear the sea answer him. A low, constant reply that says, "I'm still here." As you head down the narrow spiral staircase, your hand slides along the cold metal railing. Halfway down you spot something, carved faintly into the wall. 2 initials joined by a small heart, faded almost to nothing. You trace the letters, a +M. You don't ask about them. You don't need to. That night, dinner is quiet again. The keeper eats slowly, staring at his plate like he's memorizing it. His wife sits across from him, her fingers resting on the edge of her cup, unmoving. The only sound is the wind pressing against the glass and the slow rhythm of the lighthouse beam sweeping through the room. When the lamp goes out and the waves grow louder, you lie awake once more. You can hear the keeper's boots outside pacing. You can hear her moving too. Soft, deliberate steps that pause every few seconds, like she's waiting for something. Then faintly, you hear her hum. It's the quietest sound, almost nothing at all, but it's there, just long enough to make you wonder if maybe her silence isn't an absence, but a choice. And as you drift into sleep, the sound of that hum stays with you, threading through the rhythm of the sea, wrapping itself around the light like a promise no one remembers making. Morning arrives differently this time. Slower, heavier. The fog has thickened overnight, curling around the rocks like old ghosts, refusing to leave. You can't see much beyond the porch, just the shape of the tower's base and the faint shimmer of sea foam where the waves crash. It's the kind of morning where sound travels oddly, muffled yet close, as though the world's holding its breath. Inside, the cottage feels smaller than it did yesterday. The fire is burned low and the air carries that in-between smell. Part salt, part ash, part something else you can't quite name. The silent wife moves quietly near the stove, her hair loosely tied back, the ends catching bits of morning light. You realize she hasn't spoken a single word since you arrived, and yet somehow she said everything that matters. When she hands you your cup of tea, her fingers brush yours for a second. Brief, unintentional, but strangely grounding. You mutter a thank you she doesn't acknowledge, though her eyes flick toward you soft and unreadable. The keeper enters a few minutes later, his coat already damp from mist. Visibility's bad, he mutters, mostly to himself. Can't see more than 20 yards. Should clear by noon. His voice is quieter than usual, as though he's wary of disturbing the silence she carries. You catch the way he looks at her, not with distance, but with a kind of quiet reverence that's almost uncomfortable to witness. It's love, you think, though shaped by years of weather and waiting. You decide to walk along the cliffs while they work. The fog makes the path disappear a few feet ahead, so every step feels uncertain, like walking into someone's dream. The wind bites at your face. The taste of salt stings your lips. Somewhere in the distance, the lighthouse bell tolls once, low and mournful, a sound that feels more like memory than warning. When you return, she's standing outside the cottage, arms crossed against the cold. her eyes locked on the horizon. You follow her gaze, but there's nothing there, just fog, and the faintest outline of a ship that may not exist. For a moment you think she might speak. Her lips part slightly, then close again. Instead, she reaches into her apron and pulls out a folded piece of paper. She holds it out to you. It's a sketch. Rough, drawn in pencil, but surprisingly detailed. A small boat, a single figure, and written below in that same careful handwriting you saw in the notebook, "Sometimes they never make it back." You look up, but she's already turned away, walking slowly toward the lighthouse steps. You stand there, holding the paper, feeling the damp air cling to your skin. The message isn't dramatic, it's just true. Inside, the keeper is at his desk, tracing numbers on a weather map. You hand him the drawing, unsure what else to do. He studies it for a moment, then sighs. "She draws when the fog gets like this," he says, voice low. Says it helps her remember who's out there. You nod, though you can't tell if that comforts him or makes things worse. By afternoon, the fog begins to lift, revealing a coastline soaked in gray-blue light. The sea looks endless again, vast, unknowable, pretending to be calm. You watch as the keeper climbs the spiral staircase to light the lamp early, just in case. The wife follows halfway, carrying a small oil can. She moves with practiced precision, never rushing, never fumbling. You realize this tower, its rhythm, its silence, is their whole language. That evening you share supper again. The fire crackles, the clock ticks, and the air between them feels almost tangible. When the keeper excuses himself to check the lens, she remains seated, staring into the flames. After a moment, she reaches for a small wooden box on the mantel. She opens it carefully and removes something wrapped in fabric, an old compass. She holds it for a long time before setting it on the table in front of you. The glass is cracked and the needle quivers, even though the room is still. You notice faint letters scratched into the metal rim. To M- find your way home. When you look up, she's already watching you. Her eyes are steady but tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep. You whisper, "Who's M?" She doesn't answer. She doesn't need to. The lighthouse beam cuts across the window again, its light sliding over her face. For a moment, you could swear you see something there. Grief, maybe, or devotion, or both tangled together. Then it's gone, replaced by the calm mask she wears so naturally. Later that night, you lie awake, listening to the sea again. The house creaks like it's breathing. Somewhere above, this keeper's footsteps echo through the tower. And faintly, beneath it all, you hear her hum once more. The same tune, the same delicate thread of sound weaving through the rhythm of waves. You wonder who taught her that song. You wonder if she still remembers the voice that used to sing it with her. By the next morning, the fog has thinned, leaving behind a strange, glowing brightness that makes everything look newly washed. The rocks slick with dew, the tower's glass catching the light like a prism. You wake to the sound of distant gulls and the faint clatter of dishes from the kitchen. The world feels steady again, but there's a heaviness in the air, as if the silence has thickened overnight. When you step outside, the keeper is halfway up the lighthouse stairs, shoulders hunched against the wind. The door creaks open wider than usual, revealing the rhythm of their lives. Steady, repetitive, almost sacred in its monotony. The wife moves around the cottage with quiet purpose, sweeping the floor, tending to the fire, folding laundry that probably didn't need folding. You can tell every movement is part of a pattern older than words. She hands you a note as you pass the table. Her handwriting small, precise. We keep to routine. It helps the sea stay calm. You almost laugh, but stop yourself. There's no joke in her expression. Maybe she means it literally. Maybe she's right. The keeper comes down a few minutes later, his boots leaving a trail of salt water on the floor. Winds shifting east, he mutters. Might get rough tonight. Then softer, as though it's a confession rather than a forecast, the sea remembers. The day drifts the way all days here seem to, in long stretches of quiet punctuated by small sounds, the scrape of a chair, the clang of a lantern chain, the sigh of waves against the rocks. The keeper works methodically, his logbook open, ink-stained fingers, recording details that only matter to him. You offer to help clean the lamp glass, and he nods, wordlessly grateful. Together you climb the narrow stairs, every creak echoing like a heartbeat. From the top, you can see the whole coastline, the jagged cliffs, the small harbor far below, the tiny dots of fishing boats bobbing like forgotten toys. The sea looks endless again, its surface rippling under the weight of light. The wind howls through the cracks, carrying the faint taste of rain. She doesn't come up here anymore, the keeper says quietly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Used to, years ago. Said the view made her dizzy, said she preferred to listen instead. You glance at him. Listen to what? The water, he says. She says it speaks. Some days louder than others. You don't reply. There's something about the way he says it that makes you believe him. That evening, you all eat in silence again. It's strange how the quiet no longer feels awkward. It's become its own kind of music. Steady, predictable, comforting. The only light comes from the fire, and the occasional sweep of the lighthouse beam across the room, painting slow-moving shadows on the walls. The keeper finishes his meal first, sets his fork down carefully, and stands. Routine, he says again, as if the word itself keeps him steady. He steps outside to check the weather instruments, leaving you alone with her. She sits across from you, the firelight reflecting in her eyes. There's something calm but searching in her gaze, like she's trying to measure how long you'll last here before the silence swallows you too. Then, without warning, she rises and disappears into the next room. You hear a drawer open, paper rustling. When she returns, she's holding a small folded note. She places it in front of you and then goes back to stirring the fire. You open it carefully. The note says only, "He wasn't supposed to stay." Your stomach tightens. You look at her, but she's staring into the flames as though the answer's already burning there. When the keeper returns, nothing in his face betrays anything unusual. He wipes his hands on a rag, nods toward the window. "Wind's rising," he says simply. "Better secure the shutters." Later that night, the wind does rise, wild and constant, the kind of wind that makes you feel like the whole world's swaying. The sound of the waves grows rougher, crashing harder against the rocks. You lie in bed listening to the storm build, the walls groaning softly under the pressure. Through the noise, you catch faint footsteps. You open your eyes and see her silhouette at a window, motionless, watching the sea. Her hair moves gently in the draft, her posture straight, almost defiant. The lighthouse beam cuts across her face, and for just a second she looks like part of the light itself. Luminous, unreachable. You want to speak, to ask what she's waiting for. But before you can, she turns and walks away, her shadow vanishing into the next room. Outside, the keeper's lantern sways back and forth as he checks the tower. The beam continues its steady rhythm, slicing through fog and rain like a heartbeat that refuses to stop. And somewhere deep inside you, you understand. Silence isn't emptiness here. It's the only thing that's still holding the world together. The storm doesn't end so much as dissolve into a damp, heavy stillness by dawn. The air outside tastes like iron and salt. The sky, an endless smear of dull gray. You wake to the rhythmic drip of water from the eaves and the smell of wet stone. Everything feels slower, heavier, like the world hasn't yet decided to start the new day. Inside the cottage, the keeper is already awake, mending a rope with quiet concentration. His sleeves are rolled to his elbows, his movements methodical and unbothered. You notice a faint tremor in his hands when he ties the final knot. Not weakness exactly, just the mark of someone who's carried too much routine for too many years. The silent wife moves about the kitchen, hair damp from the mist, her pale dress brushing the wooden floor with each step. You catch her humming again, barely audible, beneath the scrape of a pan. It's the same tune from the other night. Faint, haunting, more vibration than melody. You sit at the small wooden table, sipping tea that's gone lukewarm too quickly. The keeper joins you, setting down a small notebook. Not the weather log this time, but something older. The pages are fragile, smudged, corners curling like dried petals. He flips through it slowly. My father kept this lighthouse before me, he says, not looking up. And his father before him. It's not much of a legacy, but it keeps you honest. The sea has a way of making you earn your peace. You ask if his wife's family has always lived here too. His hand still for a moment on the page. No, he says simply. She came from the mainland. Wasn't supposed to stay. The echo of her note from the night before ripples in your mind. He wasn't supposed to stay. You wonder which one of them it was meant for. Later, as the morning unfolds, the wind picks up again. Not the violent kind, but constant enough to make the shutters rattle. You and the keeper climb the tower to inspect the lens. The narrow stairwell is lit only by slivers of light sneaking through the stone walls, the air damp and cold. At the top, the view steals your breath again. The sea stretches to forever, restless but beautiful. A quilt of dark blue and silver. You can see the faint remains of the storm, distant clouds curling away like smoke. The beam of the lighthouse cuts through it all, strong and patient. She used to love it up here, he murmurs, before she stopped talking. He doesn't elaborate. You don't ask. There's a shared understanding now that words in this place aren't meant to fill silence, only to honor it. You spend the afternoon helping where you can, oiling the lanterns, sweeping the steps, carrying buckets of water from the rain barrel. She writes your task down on scraps of paper, her handwriting careful and almost too neat. You find yourself watching her hands as she writes, steady and deliberate, like every motion is a language in itself. At dinner, the air feels different. Not tense, but heavier somehow. She places the dishes in front of you both, her face expressionless. The only sound is the fire's low crackle and the rhythmic pulse of the beam outside. The keeper eats slowly, occasionally glancing toward her but never saying a word. It feels like a ritual that's been repeated too many times to change. You try to make small talk, something harmless about the storm or the fog. But your voice feels wrong here. Too loud, too modern. You stop mid-sentence, and she gives the faintest smile, as if amused by your attempt. After dinner, she brings out the same compass she'd shown you before, and sets it in front of her husband this time. He looks at it for a long moment, his jaw tightening. Then, almost under his breath, he says, "It's his." You wait, but that's all he offers. She looks down, her fingers brushing the edge of the cracked glass. The silence between them deepens, not angry, just weighted with something unfinished. That night you can't sleep again. The storm has left the waves louder, their rhythm uneven. You get up, drawn by the faint glow from the lighthouse window. When you reach the base of the tower, you find her sitting on the bottom step, shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. She looks up as you approach and gestures for you to sit. For a while, you both just listen to the distant waves, to the low hum of the lamp above. Then she takes out her small notebook and writes one line, tearing the page and handing it to you. Some people come here to be found, others to disappear quietly. You look at the words until they blur. When you finally glance up, she's already rising, her shawl fluttering behind her like a ghost of fabric. She walks toward the edge of the cliff where the sea meets the dark, pauses, and tilts her head as if listening to something you can't hear. Then she turns and walks back toward the cottage. Each step measured, graceful, certain. And even though she hasn't spoken a word, her silence follows you like an echo all the way back to your room. You lie awake for hours, the note still in your hand, wondering which one of them is trying to disappear. The morning feels strange, lighter somehow, though the clouds are still heavy and low. There's a kind of hollow brightness in the air, like the world hasn't decided whether to be calm or restless. The smell of salt is stronger today, mixed with something faintly metallic. You step outside and find the keeper already at work, hammering at a loose board near the boathouse. His movements are sharp, impatient, a contrast to his usual measured rhythm. The wife isn't in sight. The cottage door stands half open, curtains trembling in the wind. You hesitate before stepping closer, feeling as though you're intruding on something private. Inside, the kettle is whistling softly on the stove, though the fire underneath has almost burned out. Her notebook lies on the table, a single page open. Storms change everything, even the ones that never reach the shore. You close the book gently. When you step back outside, the keeper is looking at you, not angry, not suspicious, just aware that you've seen something you weren't meant to. He wipes his hands on a rag, the lines on his face deeper in the morning light. "She's gone to the market," he says flatly, though you both know there is no market for miles. Then, quieter, "She walks sometimes, follows the cliffs. You offer to help with repairs, grateful for the distraction. Together you patch the boards, check the oil, polish the lenses. The repetition feels almost meditative. At one point you ask how long they've been married. He pauses mid-hammer, his eyes drifting toward the sea. "Long enough to know what silence really means," he says. And that's the end of that. By noon, she's still not back. The fog starts creeping in again, thin at first, then thickening until the sea vanishes entirely. You notice the keeper's posture stiffen as he stares into the gray wall. Every few minutes he glances toward the path that leads along the cliffs. When the foghorn sounds its deep, mournful note rolling through the mist, he finally sets his tools down. "She knows this place better than anyone," he mutters. but the words sound more like a prayer than a fact. You wait with him, the minutes stretching longer than they should. Then through the fog, her silhouette appears, small, steady, moving with the slow rhythm of someone used to walking on the edge of the world. She's carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. When she reaches the porch, she unwraps it. Seashells, driftwood, and a single unlit candle. She places them carefully on the windowsill, one by one, arranging them as though they're pieces of a message only she can read. The keeper doesn't ask where she went. He just watches her, the tension in his shoulders easing, but his eyes still searching her face for something she doesn't offer. After a while, she writes on a small scrap of paper and hands it to you. For calm seas, we light what's been forgotten. Then she lights the candle. The flame flickers weakly in the wind, but somehow stays alive. You can't help staring at it. The way it trembles, the way its light feels strangely steady despite everything around it moving. She steps back, folds her hands, and watches until the candle burns halfway down. Then she turns and walks inside, her expression unreadable. The keeper finally speaks. She started that years ago, he says softly. After the last big storm. Said it keeps the sea kind. He gives a small, humorless laugh. I told her the sea doesn't care. But maybe she's right. Maybe it listens to her. You both stand there watching the tiny flame fight the wind. It's ridiculous, you think? This small light against an ocean. But at the same time, it's the most certain thing in the world. That night, the fog thickens again, but it's a softer kind of dark, muted, muffled, almost kind. The waves move slower, like they've remembered how to breathe. You sit by the fire while the keeper writes in his logbook. His wife sits across from him, sewing something small, her head bent low over the fabric. The silence between them feels less like distance now, more like understanding. Before bed, she leaves another note by your door. Every lighthouse needs 3 lights. One for the sea, one for the sky, and one for what's lost. You turn the note over, tracing the ink with your thumb. You wonder what her 3rd light is, the one she guards so carefully behind her quiet eyes. As you drift to sleep, you imagine the candle still flickering on the windowsill outside, its flame refusing to die, whispering to the waves in a language you'll never learn. And in that steady glow, you start to understand that maybe this place was never about storms or survival. Maybe it's about learning to stay, quietly, stubbornly, when everything else wants to drift away. By dawn, the world is silver again. That same muted shimmer that always seems to follow a night of fog. The waves move slowly and the air feels thick, like it's filled with thoughts that haven't settled yet. You wake to the faint sound of the lighthouse bell, a single tone cutting through the stillness. It feels less like a warning and more like a heartbeat, a quiet reminder that this place is still alive. The keeper is outside, bent over a crate, sorting through supplies that look like they've been shipped decades ago. You join him, offering to help. He doesn't say no, but he doesn't say yes either. He just shifts aside slightly, leaving space for you to stand beside him, which, in this house, counts as permission. After a while, you ask the question that's been itching at the back of your mind. Why does she never speak? He doesn't look at you. He keeps sorting, stacking, checking the oil lamps. Some things break, he says finally, and words don't fix them. You wait, hoping he'll continue, but he doesn't. Instead, he picks up a rusted wrench, turning it in his hands like he's remembering something that happened a long time ago. "She used to sing," he adds softly, almost to himself. "Every morning. Used to hum while she worked. The walls were full of it. Then one night it stopped." He looks up at the horizon where the sky meets the sea, his eyes squinting against the light. That was the night the last ship went down. You want to ask what he means, but before you can, she appears. Barefoot, standing at the doorway, holding a basket of folded linens. Her gaze lingers on the two of you, then drifts toward the sea, as if she already knows what he's been saying. She gives a small, almost imperceptible nod, then disappears back inside. The keeper sighs. "There's a lot the sea takes that it never gives back," he murmurs. "Sometimes it's better not to ask what those things are." The rest of the day drifts like tidewater, night quiet, repetitive, strangely peaceful. You fall into their rhythm now, morning chores, lighthouse checks, evening tea by the fire. The silence has become a kind of language, one you're starting to understand. At lunch, she leaves a note on your plate instead of speaking. Every sound means something different here. Waves, wind, footsteps. You just have to listen long enough, you find yourself trying. You listen to the waves, how their rhythm changes when the tide turns, how the gulls sound closer before storms. You notice how the keeper's footsteps echo differently when he's tired. You even start to hear her silence differently too, not as emptiness, but as patience. That evening, the three of you sit by the fire again. The flame dances low, throwing soft shadows against the walls. The keeper dozes off in his chair, and she's sewing something again. Small pieces of fabric, all shades of gray and white, stitched together like fragments of sky. You ask quietly, "What are you making?" She looks up, tilts her head, and after a moment, writes on a piece of paper, "A map of what isn't there anymore." You smile faintly, unsure what that means. "Does it help?" She thinks for a moment, then writes, "It keeps my hands busy." The two of you sit in silence again, the sound of rain beginning to tap gently against the window. After a few minutes, she adds another line, smaller this time. "He thinks I don't remember." Your chest tightens. Before you can respond, she folds the paper neatly and tucks it into her pocket, as if the act of hiding it is part of the message. Later that night, when the keeper goes to light the lamp, she follows him partway up the stairs. You watch from below as they move in quiet harmony, their lanterns casting soft light along the narrow stone walls. When he reaches the top, she pauses halfway, hand resting on the railing, head tilted up toward him. It's such a simple moment. Two silhouettes framed by flickering light, yet it feels impossibly heavy, like you're witnessing a ritual that's been repeated 1,000 times. The storm never comes that night, though the clouds threaten it. Instead, there's only a slow drizzle, a kind of weeping sky that matches the rhythm of the waves. Before you sleep, you find a slip of paper tucked under your pillow. Her handwriting again, softer now, as if written in low light. The sea forgets no one, but it forgives quietly. You lie there for a long time, listening to the faint hum of the lighthouse machinery, the steady pulse of its beams sweeping through the mist. You think of forgiveness, how it can look like silence, how it can sound like waves. And as you drift towards sleep, you realize that maybe that's what love looks like too. Not loud, not desperate, just a quiet, unwavering light that keeps turning even when no one's watching. By the time the sun rises again, the fog has lifted completely. The air feels clearer, lighter, like the world has finally exhaled after holding its breath too long. You wake to the sound of gulls and the rhythmic creak of the keeper's boots pacing along the dock outside. The smell of salt, metal, and something faintly sweet drifts in through the open window. You step outside, blinking against the sudden brightness. The sea stretches out, calm and endless, the color of melted glass. The keeper is inspecting the small rowboat tied to the post, his sleeves rolled up, his movements slower than usual. "Water's quiet today," he says without turning. "Almost feels wrong." You glance toward the cottage. The wife is standing near the cliff's edge, shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She's holding another one of her candles, unlit this time, cradling it like something fragile. The wind catches her hair and lifts it gently, and for a second she looks almost transparent, like she belongs to the light more than the earth. "She does that when the sea's too calm," the keeper says, following your gaze. Says the silence before a storm is louder than the storm itself. You nod, unsure if he's joking or quoting her. Either way, the truth of it hums in the air around you. Later, after breakfast, the three of you walk down to the rocky shore. The tide's gone out, revealing glistening pools scattered with bits of broken shell and seaweed. The wife kneels beside one of them, tracing shapes in the sand with her finger. Circles, lines, something that looks almost like writing. You watch her for a while, fascinated by how calm she looks, like she's in conversation with the sea itself. The keeper watches too, but from a distance. His face is unreadable, his hands buried deep in his pockets. You get the sense that he's always watching her, not possessively, but with a kind of awe tinged with fear, as though he's never entirely sure if she'll stay. When she finishes tracing her shapes, she looks up and catches your eye. Then she smiles faintly and motions you closer. In the sand, she's written 4 words. The tide remembers everything. You want to ask what she means, but she's already walking away, her bare feet leaving shallow prints that the water begins to erase immediately. Back at the cottage, the keeper busies himself with the lamps. You sit by the window staring at the sea. The candle she'd been holding now burns faintly on the windowsill, its flame steady even as the wind shifts. You realize that here, light and silence seem to mean the same thing, both a signal, both a prayer. By evening, clouds begin to gather again, slow and deliberate, building on the horizon like a dark promise. The keeper checks his instruments, frowning. "Storm coming," he mutters. "Small one, maybe." But they never stay small for long. You help them prepare. Shutters closed, lanterns checked, ropes tightened. She moves quietly through it all, her face calm, but her hands quick, practiced. You can tell this is routine for her, maybe even comfort. Every time lightning flickers in the distance, she pauses to look toward the sea, her eyes soft but searching. When everything is ready, the three of you sit together by the fire. The first raindrops begin to fall, tapping gently against the window. The wind rises just enough to make the flame flicker. The keeper leans back, rubbing his temples. "It's the waiting that gets you," he says. "Storms are fine once they start. It's the silence before them that drives you mad." She looks up at him, a faint, knowing smile ghosting across her lips. Then she reaches for her notebook and writes something before sliding it across the table. He reads it and his jaw tightens. You can't help but lean a little closer, catching only the first few words. He didn't wait long enough. The keeper closes the notebook, setting it aside without replying. The silence that follows feels thick, but not cruel. It's the silence of two people who have learned to live with their ghosts. Hours pass like that, quiet, steady, wrapped in the sound of rain. At one point she gets up and lights another candle, placing it beside the window. The glow spills softly across the room, mingling with the lighthouse beam that sweeps through every few seconds. For a moment, the light from both sources overlap. One man-made, one human, and it feels strangely right. Before bed, you notice her leaving another note near the door. Curiosity wins. You unfold it and read. When the light and the sea speak together, someone always comes home. You don't know what it means, not really, but as you lie down, the wind picking up again outside, you find yourself hoping she's right, that somewhere, someone still finds their way home because of that thin beam of light spinning endlessly into the dark. And even as sleep pulls at you, you can still see her in your mind, standing by the window, face lit by candlelight, eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for something that maybe she already knows will never return. The storm arrives quietly, without thunder, like a secret slipping in through the cracks. You wake in the middle of the night to the sound of wind pressing against the shutters and the low groan of the tower as it shifts under the force. The lighthouse beam sweeps through the fog every few seconds, slicing the dark into brief moments of clarity before everything blurs again. You hear footsteps in the hall, slow, careful ones. When you peek out, the keeper is standing by the window, his face caught in the faint glow of the lamp. He's fully dressed, boots on, coat half buttoned. There's a tension in the air around him, a kind of restless waiting that has nothing to do with weather. She's gone to the cliff again, he murmurs without turning. You glance past him toward the dark horizon. The rain has turned into a fine mist, almost invisible in the lighthouse's beam. Now, you whisper, in this weather? He doesn't answer. He just runs a hand through his hair and grabs the lantern hanging by the door. She always goes when the sea sounds like this, he says, voice low. Says it calls to her. You follow him outside. The cold hits like a wave, sharp, clean, alive. The air tastes of salt and lightning, though there's no thunder yet. You can barely see 5 feet ahead, the fog curling thick around you, the ground slick beneath your boots. When you reach the cliffs, the sound of the ocean roars up from below, deep, endless, old. And there she is, standing at the edge, her shawl whipping around her, her face turned toward the sea, as though listening to something only she can hear. The candle she holds is still lit somehow, its tiny flame trembling but unbroken. Alana, the keeper calls, her name, the first time you've heard it spoken. It sounds both familiar and fragile, like something he hasn't dared say aloud for years. She turns, her expression calm. For a second, she looks at him, then at you, then back to the sea. She doesn't move, doesn't flinch, even as the wind tugs at her clothes. The keeper steps closer, the lantern swinging wildly in his hand. You'll fall, he says, his voice breaking slightly. Come back inside. It's not time. She tilts her head, and though she doesn't speak, you can almost hear the words she isn't saying. It's never time. It's always too late. Then slowly, she steps back from the edge. The wind eases just enough to let the sound of her footsteps reach you. Soft deliberate, steady. When she reaches him, she touches his arm gently, her fingers lingering for a heartbeat, longer than necessary. It's such a small gesture, but it feels like a whole story. Together you walk back to the cottage in silence. Inside, the air feels warmer, safer somehow. She sets the candle on the table, its flame still alive, and the keeper sinks into a chair, exhaling like he's been holding his breath for years. She never used to be afraid, he says quietly. Not of the storms, not of the sea. I think that's what I loved most about her. He glances up at her. But you can't love the sea and keep your heart dry. Alana places her hand on his shoulder. For a moment, neither of them move. Then she walks to the window, where the light from the lighthouse beam glides across her face. She stares out at the waves as if she's counting them. The keeper takes something from his pocket and sets it on the table, a small, weathered photograph. You lean closer. It shows 3 people standing beside the lighthouse. A younger version of the keeper, Alana, and a man you don't recognize, smiling, wind-blown, hand resting on Alana's shoulder. His name was Michael, the keeper says, his voice thin. My brother. You don't say anything, you don't have to. The rain picks up again, steady and rhythmic. The candle flame dances in time with the light sweeping through the window. Alana doesn't turn, doesn't react, but her hand drifts slowly to her pocket. You see the edge of something. A small piece of paper folded, worn soft from being touched too many times. The keeper's voice is quieter now. His ship went down 15 years ago, right out there, in that stretch of water. He was bringing supplies to the mainland. She heard the signal first, the distress flare. She ran out before I could stop her. He swallows hard. By the time the tide turned, all we found was the wreckage. You glance at Alana again. Her shoulders rise and fall, slow and deliberate. The paper in her hand trembles slightly. She stopped speaking after that, he says. Didn't make a sound for months. I thought I'd lost her too. But then one night she started lighting candles. Said light travels farther than words ever could. He looks at the flickering flame now. Maybe she's right. You sit in silence with them, the weight of years pressing gently against the small room. The rain softens, the sea calms, and for a moment it feels like the whole world is holding still, waiting for the light to sweep by one more time. Later, when you finally lie down, the beam from the lighthouse passes over your bed every few seconds. Steady, patient, endless. Between each rotation, you can almost hear the faint sound of her humming again, drifting through the walls, keeping time with the waves. It's not a song of sorrow anymore. It's something else, something closer to peace. The next morning feels quieter than it should. The storm has passed, leaving the air damp and heavy, the kind that smells like rain long after it's gone. The horizon is a pale blur, soft blues bleeding into grays, and for a moment, it's hard to tell where the sea ends and the sky begins. You wake to the faint sound of the lighthouse gears turning, that deep, steady hum that's almost become a lullaby by now. When you step outside, the world feels clean, washed, rinsed of noise. The grass still glistens with drops of water, and the rocks shine darkly in the weak sunlight. The keeper stands by the railing near the cliff, a cup of coffee in one hand, his logbook in the other. His eyes are fixed on the water, though you get the sense he isn't really seeing it. She's gone walking again, he says softly without looking at you. Always walks after storms. says the sea leaves messages behind you. Nod, unsure whether to ask what kind of messages those might be. Instead, you sip your own coffee and follow his gaze toward the horizon. The tide is out, and on the exposed beach below, you can just make out a figure, Alana, moving slowly among the rocks, her dress brushing the tide line like the hem of a memory. The keeper watches her for a long while before finally speaking again. "Michael was supposed to take my place," he says. "He didn't want me stuck here forever. Said I should go inland, try something new. I told him I'd think about it. But I never did. You wait, letting him take his time." He breathes out through his nose, the air leaving him in a tired sigh. "After the wreck, there was no one to blame but the sea. And maybe me. He sent a message before the ship went down, said the compass was off, that he'd lost his bearings. It was the one I gave him." He takes a long sip of coffee, then adds quietly, "She never said it, but I think she blames me too." You don't answer. There's nothing to say. The truth between them feels too fragile, like something that's already survived too many storms, to be disturbed again. By noon, Alana returns, her hair wine-tangled, her shawl damp from sea spray. She carries a small wooden box in her arms, the kind that looks handmade, corners uneven, edges smoothed from years of handling. She sets it on the table without a word, then unwraps the cloth around it. Inside is a collection of tiny objects: seashells, bits of glass, rusted nails, a small piece of metal shaped like part of a ship's wheel. The keeper's hand twitches when he sees it. "From the wreck?" you ask softly. She nods once, then takes out a folded slip of paper and lays it beside the box. It's yellowed, water damaged, the ink smudged almost to illegibility, but you can still make out a few words. "Light's still turning. Hold fast." The keeper reads it 3 times, his lips tightening. When he looks up, there's something raw in his expression. Not anger, not grief exactly, but recognition. "It's his handwriting," he says quietly. "She must have found this years ago." Alana doesn't move. She just stands there watching him. Her hands tremble slightly, but her face stays calm, composed, as though she's prepared for this moment her whole life. After a long silence, the keeper reaches across the table and covers her hand with his. It's the first time you've seen him touch her like that. She closes her eyes, not pulling away. "I should have gone after him," he says softly. "Should have kept the light stronger that night." She opens her eyes again and writes something on the corner of the old note before pushing it back toward him. You catch a glimpse as it passes. "You did?" "I saw it." He stares at the words for a long moment, then lets out a shaky breath, something halfway between a laugh and a sob. The air in the room feels lighter, though you can't quite tell why. Maybe it's forgiveness. Maybe it's just understanding finally finding its place to rest. That evening, the 3 of you climb the lighthouse together. The wind is gentle, the sea calm, the light turning slow and steady. From the top, the world feels impossibly wide, the horizon stretching forever, the ocean glinting like glass in the dying sun. Alana leans against the railing, her face bathed in gold. For the first time since you've known her, she looks entirely at peace. No sorrow, no silence, just stillness. The keeper stands beside her, hands resting lightly on the rail. Neither of them speak, and you realize they don't need to. The air between them is filled with everything they've never said. When the light flicks on for the night, the beam sweeps across the water, strong and sure. You watch as it catches something far in the distance, A shimmer, faint but real, like the ghost of a reflection. You blink, and it's gone, but the feeling lingers. The sense that something unseen has finally come home. As you make your way down the stairs, the keeper pauses halfway, resting a hand against the wall where those old carved initials are barely visible. A+M. He traces them gently, then looks up at you. Guess the sea finally forgave us, he says quietly. Alana, standing at the bottom of the stairs, turns at that moment. She doesn't speak, but when she smiles, it's small and real, and somehow brighter than the light itself. And for the first time since you arrived, the lighthouse feels less like a monument to loss, and more like a place still keeping watch for something worth saving. The next morning arrives soft and colorless, where that kind of half-light that makes everything look painted in quiet grays. The storm smell still lingers in the air, seaweed and iron. But the waves are calm again, sighing instead of roaring. You wake before the keeper's footsteps, before even the gulls find their voices. For once, the lighthouse feels perfectly still. You wander outside, the grass cool beneath your boots, the sky a pale wash of mist. Down by the edge of the cliff, Alana stands alone, her shawl drawn tight, watching the line where water meets sky. There's no candle today, no notebook in her hand. Just her and the sea, like two old friends who don't need to talk anymore. When she finally notices you, she gives a faint nod, then gestures toward the horizon. Beautiful, isn't it? She seems to say with her eyes, and even though she doesn't speak, the meaning lands as clear as sound. You nod back, and for the first time you realize how expressive silence can be, how it can say everything words often ruin. After breakfast, the keeper rummages through a chest you hadn't seen before, pulling out a weathered box tied with string. He unties it carefully, as if opening a wound. Inside are yellowed pages, letters, maps, pieces of a life lived before the lighthouse swallowed theirs. He hands you one of the letters. The ink has bled with time, but a few words remain. Our light will be the last thing they see before home. It's signed by Michael. The keeper gives a half smile, the kind that hurts more than frowning. He used to say that all the time, he murmurs. Said a lighthouse isn't just for ships, it's for people too. Keeps them from losing themselves. He closes the box and sets it aside. I used to think he was talking about the sea. Now I'm not so sure. The rest of the morning unfolds quietly. Alana tends to the garden, a small patch of herbs and stubborn wildflowers that cling to life despite the salt air. The keeper oils the lantern's gears. You sweep the floors that don't need sweeping. It's a rhythm now, the three of you orbiting the same small world, keeping it steady just by existing inside it. At midday, Alana brings out a stack of small bound notebooks, dozens of them. She places them on the table and looks between you and her husband. Her gaze lingers on him longer. Then she opens the first one. The pages are filled with writing, her handwriting neat but soft, lines running edge to edge. You recognize the same voice from the short notes she's given you, but this is fuller, deeper. She's written entire days, years even. Her thoughts about storms, tides, and quiet moments, and among them, fragments of something more personal. She turns to one page and points for the keeper to read. You can see the words from where you sit. When the sea took him. I thought it took you too. But the light stayed, so I stayed. The keeper's hand trembles slightly as he touches the page. "I didn't know you wrote all this," he says, voice raw. She takes a small piece of chalk and writes 3 words on the table itself. "You never asked?" He laughs softly, the sound breaking halfway. Then almost instinctively he reaches for her hand. She lets him hold it this time. No words, no explanations. Just fingers finding each other again after too many years of separation. You look away. Not out of discomfort, but respect. The fire pops softly in the hearth, and the sound fills the room like a sigh. By afternoon, the air changes again, a warm breeze rising from the south, carrying the scent of distant rain. The keeper goes out to check the horizon. Alana follows him to the doorway, then turns back to you and motions for you to wait. She retrieves a notebook from the top of the stack and slides it towards you. On the first page, in that same graceful script, is a title, "The Keeper Who Forgot to Leave." You smile, half expecting her to take it back, but she doesn't. Instead, she gestures toward the chair beside the window, her chair, as if giving you permission to read. Hours pass that way. You read quietly while she moves through the room, tidying small things, tending to the kettle, glancing out toward the water every few minutes. Her writing is simple but alive, filled with observations, small acts of love she never spoke aloud. In one entry she wrote, "Sometimes I think love is just the patience to keep lighting the lamp even when no one's looking." By the time the keeper returns, the light outside has softened into evening. The sea glows faintly pink at the edges, and the lighthouse beam waits unlit like a breath being held. He steps inside, brushing salt from his sleeves. "Weather's turning fair," he says. "Should be clear for days." Alana nods, a smile tugging gently at her lips. She picks up the last of her notebooks, holds it for a moment, then sets it down beside the others, as if closing a chapter not just on paper but in her life. Later, as night settles, the lighthouse light sweeps across the water once more. You stand at the window and watch its glow stretch into the distance. That single patient beam that has carried so much of their story. Behind you, the keeper and Alana sit close together, hands still touching, their faces calm in the flicker of firelight. The silence is the same as it's always been, but now it feels less like the absence of sound and more like the presence of peace. And as the sea hums outside, you realize you're witnessing something most people never do. Not love that begins, but love that endures. The days that follow unfold with a strange kind of stillness, not empty, but serene. The air around the lighthouse feels different now, lighter, like a room that's finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. You notice it in everything. The way the waves sound softer, the way the fog rolls in a little slower, the way the keeper hums under his breath while checking the lamps. Even Alana's silence feels gentler, less weighted, as if she's no longer guarding something from the world. Each morning begins the same. The kettle whistles, the gulls cry somewhere beyond the cliffs. You take your coffee to the balcony where the sea stretches endlessly, a mirror of pale blues. The keeper joins you sometimes, sometimes not. When he does, it's usually in companionable quiet. Two people looking out at the same horizon, saying nothing because nothing more needs saying. Alana spends most of her hours near the base of the lighthouse now, tending to the gardens or mending nets that will never be used. She hums under her breath, faint tunes you can barely make out, half melodies that rise and vanish like the tide. You begin to think this is her version of talking. Maybe it always was. One afternoon while she's watering the plants, a sudden gust of wind tears a page from one of her notebooks, left open on the table. You chase after it, laughing as it flutters away like a stubborn bird, landing finally in the damp grass. When you pick it up, you glance at the words written there. Silence can be love too, if someone listens closely enough. You pause, feeling a quiet sting in your chest, the kind that comes not from sadness but recognition. When you hand the page back to her, she gives you that familiar half smile, as if to say, you weren't meant to see that, but maybe you were. By evening, the air grows cooler. The keeper lights the lamp earlier than usual, the warm glow spilling down the spiral staircase like melted gold. The scent of oil and salt mixes in the air, oddly comforting now, like a house that's learned to breathe again. You help Alana arrange the journals on a shelf near the hearth. There are so many. Soft spines worn by years of use, pages that smell faintly of ink and seawater. It's her archive, the keeper says with a chuckle. Every thought she ever had, written down so I wouldn't have to guess. He looks at her then, eyes soft, and adds, I think I'm finally starting to read them the way she meant. She nods, pressing a folded scrap of paper into his palm. He opens it slowly. On it, she's written a single line. You were always listening, just not with your ears. He folds the note carefully, slipping it into his breast pocket like a relic. I'll keep that, he murmurs, his voice almost swallowed by the hum of the lantern. That night, while the lighthouse beam sweeps endlessly across the sea, you can't sleep. You walk out to the balcony, wrapping a shawl tight around your shoulders. The air is crisp and clean, full of stars, more than you've seen since arriving. The sea glimmers faintly, alive with quiet motion. You hear footsteps behind you. The keeper. He steps beside you, his face illuminated by moonlight. You know, he says, his tone soft, reflective. For years, I thought this place was punishment. Too quiet, too lonely. He leans on the railing, eyes scanning the endless black. But now I think maybe it's just honest. The sea doesn't lie. It doesn't care about your stories or your grief. It just keeps moving. And if you're lucky, it lets you move with it. You nod, unsure if he's talking to you or to himself. Below, the beam of the lighthouse turns again, patient, rhythmic, eternal. It reminds you of a heartbeat. When you turn to look back through the glass, Alana is sitting by the fire, her face turned toward the window. She doesn't wave, but her expression holds something quiet and steady. Affection, perhaps, or simply peace. In that moment, the whole lighthouse feels alive. Not just the bricks and gears and light, but the air itself, filled with small, invisible threads, connecting the three of you. And somewhere deep inside, you understand what makes this place sacred. It isn't the light or the sea or even the stories. It's the stillness, the kind that doesn't demand to be noticed, but holds everything together anyway. Before heading to bed, you glance once more at the horizon. A faint line of dawn glows there already, brushing the edges of the sky in pale silver. You realize with a kind of sleepy comfort that this quiet life, the tending, the waiting, the forgiving, is its own kind of love story. One that never needed a happy ending, only the promise to keep the light burning. The next few days unfold like the calm after a long-held breath, slow, deliberate, and tender. in a way that almost feels rehearsed. The rhythm of life at the lighthouse has settled into something that feels sacred now, a choreography of silence and small gestures. You can sense the inevitability of change in the air, like the faint scent of rain before a storm, though the skies remain clear. You wake one morning to find the sea completely still, a mirror reflecting the pale pink of dawn. The world feels suspended in time, as though even the waves have agreed to take a break. You find Alana outside, sitting on a rock by the edge of the cliff, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The wind plays with the ends of her hair, and beside her the keeper stands, holding a cup of tea he seems to have forgotten to drink. There's something about them today, a stillness even quieter than usual, like a conversation without sound. When you approach, the keeper gives you a small nod, and Alana smiles faintly, but her eyes linger far out to sea. You don't ask what's wrong. You already know. Some part of you has known since the first night you saw her standing in that flickering lamplight, looking like she belonged more to the horizon than to the ground beneath her feet. Later that afternoon, she asks you for help. Not with the lamps or the records, but with the small sailboat moored near the base of the cliff. The same one that's been resting there since you arrived, never used, always ready. She gestures for you to untie the ropes while she packs a small satchel. The keeper watches from the porch, his hands gripping the railing. When you ask where she's going, she doesn't answer in words. Instead, she opens her palm to show you a folded page, one torn from her notebook. On it, written in her soft, looping script, are the words, "One more light to tend." You want to stop her to ask what she means, but something in her calm expression makes you pause. There's no urgency in her movements, no fear, only quiet resolve. The keeper joins you then, his steps slow, heavy. "She does this sometimes," he says softly. "Goes out for a while. Says she needs to listen to the water." His tone tries for casual, but you can hear the tremor beneath it. He looks at her, eyes full of a love that's more prayer than possession. "Just promise me you'll come back before dark," he whispers. Alana nods, placing her hand against his cheek for a long, steady moment. Then she turns, steps into the boat, and pushes away from shore. The wind catches the sail almost instantly, carrying her out toward the glowing afternoon horizon. You and the keeper watch her until the boat becomes a speck, then nothing. The sea swallows her quietly, like it does everything it loves. The rest of the day drifts by in silence. The keeper doesn't speak much. He sits near the fire, running his thumb along the edge of one of her notebooks. Every so often he glances toward the window, then back to the empty chair by the hearth. When evening comes, he climbs the spiral staircase alone, leaving you below, with the soft creak of the lighthouse gears. You follow a few minutes later, just in time to see him lighting the lamp, his face illuminated in gold. He doesn't look down at the sea. Not yet. He just stands there, staring into the flame. Then slowly, he lifts his eyes toward the horizon. The sea is dark now, endless but far out, barely visible. You spot it, a flicker, small, faint but steady, a lantern swinging on a distant boat. The keeper's breath catches, though he doesn't move. The light sways once, twice, then blinks. 2 short flashes, one long. He recognizes it immediately. You can see it in the way his shoulders drop. It's the old signal. "Safe?" For the first time since she left, he smiles. Not a broad grin, not joy exactly. Just quiet relief, like a man who's been holding the same thought for years and finally lets it go. She always comes back, he says softly, almost to himself. Always. The beam from the lighthouse continues its slow rotation, passing over the sea again and again, illuminating the faint reflection of her lantern until it fades into the night. Hours later, you wake to the sound of the waves against the rocks. The air smells faintly of salt and candle smoke. When you go to the window, you see the small sailboat tethered once more below the cliff, but no sign of Alana, only her shawl folded neatly over the railing. You turn toward the keeper. He's already awake, sitting by the fire, her notebook open in his lap. His expression isn't panic or sorrow. It's something softer, something that looks like acceptance. She said she had one more light to tend, he murmurs. I think I finally understand what she meant. Outside, the lighthouse beam turns again, sweeping over the sea, the cliffs, the empty boat below, lighting everything she's left behind. And as the light passes over you, warm and soft, you can almost hear her voice for the first time. Quiet, certain, carried by the wind. Keep it burning. Morning arrives without the usual rhythm. No sound of the kettle, no footsteps on the stairs, no gentle rustle of Alana's shawl near the hearth. Only the hush of the ocean, slow and deliberate, lapping at the rocks below, as if trying to explain something in its ancient language. The keeper moves like a man walking through a dream. He boils water, pours 2 cups, sets one where she usually sits, and then stands there staring at it. The steam rises between them, soft and ghostly, vanishing into the still air. You don't speak. Words feel like a disturbance in this kind of morning. The light outside is pale gold, the kind that makes everything look fragile. You step out for air, the wind cold and sharp, carrying the faint cry of gulls. Down by the cliff's edge, the small sailboat rests, its sail folded neatly, ropes tied as if handled by careful hands. Her shawl remains draped on the railing, swaying gently in the breeze. When you bring it inside, the keeper looks up. His eyes meet yours, and something unspoken passes between you. The mutual understanding that she isn't coming back, not in the way you hope. He takes the shawl, runs his hand over the fabric, then folds it carefully and places it on the chair by the window. Her chair. He doesn't say goodbye, he doesn't cry. He just exhales slowly, as though releasing a weight he's carried too long. She used to say this place was alive, he murmurs, that it remembers things. I used to think that was nonsense. He looks around, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. But now, I'm not so sure. The day unfolds in soft, quiet motions. You help him clean the glass of the lantern, polish the brass fittings, check the oil levels, all the rituals of keeping the light alive. But everything feels heavier now, slower, as though time itself has thickened. At lunch, you find him writing in the logbook, something he rarely does. He writes with small, deliberate strokes, pausing often. When he's done, he closes the book and slides it toward you. On the last page, in his uneven handwriting, he's written, "Light tended. Weather calm. Keeper steady. The sea has taken what it loves, and so has the light." You trace the words with your eyes, realizing this isn't just a log entry, it's a farewell. By late afternoon, clouds begin to gather, not storm clouds, soft cotton gray ones that move slowly, painting the horizon in muted tones. The air smells of salt and distance. The keeper stands by the window watching them form, one hand resting lightly on the back of her empty chair. I used to think she was quiet because she didn't know what to say, he says at last. But she was quiet because she'd already said everything worth saying. He turns to you. Did I ever tell you she wasn't supposed to come here? This was my post, my punishment, my refuge. Depends on who you ask. But she came anyway. Said she didn't want the sea to forget my name. You smile softly. And now? He shrugs. Now the sea won't forget hers either. That evening he insists on lighting the lantern alone. You follow him up the spiral staircase anyway, staying a few steps behind. The climb feels endless tonight, every footstep echoing through the hollow chamber like the toll of a bell. At the top the wind greets you, brisk, cold, alive. The keeper stands before the lens, hands steady as he strikes the flame. The light blooms slowly, then grows, filling the glass chamber with warm radiance. When it finally shines outward, you both watch it sweep across the darkening sea, strong and sure. There, he says softly. For her. The beam cuts through the fog, stretching farther than you've ever seen it. You swear it reaches the horizon itself. That endless breathing line between what's here and what's gone. For a moment you imagine her standing somewhere beyond it, watching the same light, smiling that quiet, knowing smile of hers. The keeper steps back, his face bathed in the glow. He looks peaceful but also tired, the kind of tired that comes from a life lived long enough to understand what truly matters. When you descend the stairs again, he pauses midway, glancing once more at the initials carved into the wall, a +M. He traces them gently, his thumb lingering there, then lets his hand fall. The rest of the night passes quietly. The sea hums its endless tune, the beam turns, the fire crackles. But the chair by the window remains empty, the shawl folded neatly across its seat. You find yourself staring at it before you go to bed, half expecting to see it move, to see her walk in, pour tea, write another note, but it stays perfectly still, perfectly silent. And somehow, that silence feels right. The morning sun rises slow and silver, turning the lighthouse walls pale gold. You wake to the gentle rhythm of the sea, the soft clink of a mug on the wooden table, and the faint hum of the keeper's voice. Something between a tune and a memory. It's the first sound you've heard from him since she left. He sits by the window facing the light, her shawl still folded neatly beside him. The fire has burned low in the hearth, leaving a soft orange glow that flickers across his face. His hands rest on his knees, steady, purposeful. There's no sorrow in his eyes today, only calm, the kind that comes when a man has finally made peace with his ghosts. You pour 2 cups of coffee out of habit. He chuckles quietly when you set one in front of him. She would have scolded me for drinking it black, he says softly. Always said bitterness was fine for the sea, not for people. You smile. She sounds like she was right. He nods, looking toward the horizon. She usually was. The day unfolds slowly, the way all days seem to in this place, with purpose but no rush. You help him clean the glass, refill the oil, sweep the floor. Outside, the gulls circle lazily in the bright air, their cries echoing faintly against the cliffs. It feels like any other morning, except it isn't. Everything has changed, but nothing has moved. When you finish your chores, he hands you a sealed envelope, worn, yellowed, your name scrawled in her delicate handwriting across the front. She wrote that before you came, he explains, said you'd know when to open it. You hesitate for a moment, then tear it open. Inside is a single sheet of paper, with a few words written in that same graceful script. Keep tending the quiet. It needs company. You swallow the lump in your throat, then fold the letter carefully. She knew, you whisper. He nods. She always did. That afternoon you walk together down the path to the cliffs. The wind has picked up slightly, but it's warm, the kind that carries whispers instead of chills. From up here, the sea looks endless, shimmering under the weight of sunlight. The keeper sets down a small wooden box you recognize, the one she used to fill with her trinkets and sea glass. He opens it, revealing her last note inside. When the light burns without me, remember that it still burns for you. He doesn't cry. He simply closes the box, tucks it under his arm, and looks out over the horizon. I used to think she was keeping me company, he says. Now I think maybe I was keeping hers. The rest of the afternoon passes in companionable silence. You sit beside him on the grass, the wind brushing against your faces, the waves murmuring below. When he finally stands, the sun is low, gilding the edges of the clouds. Time to light it, he says. You follow him up the spiral staircase one last time. The lantern room greets you with its familiar scent of oil and salt. Together you trim the wick and strike the match. The flame catches quickly, blooming into that steady glow that has outlived storms, grief, and time. As the light begins its turn, you step back, watching it sweep across the sea. Its beam steady, sure, eternal. It's strange how something so mechanical can feel alive, as if the lighthouse itself breathes when the lantern burns. The keeper stands beside you, eyes reflecting the light. When I'm gone, he says quietly, it'll still turn. That's how I'll know she's here. You don't answer. You just nod, watching the light stretch outward until it fades into the fog, endlessly repeating its patient dance. That night you dream of her, not in words or scenes, but in sensations. The warmth of lamplight, the hush of waves, the faint rustle of paper. When you wake, dawn is breaking again, soft and gray, and the lighthouse still hums like a living thing. Downstairs, the keeper's chair is empty, a mug half full beside it. His coat hangs by the door. On the table lies his logbook, open to a final entry. Light tended. Keeper at rest. Sea calm. You stand there for a long time, letting the morning fill the room. Then quietly, you walk to the spiral staircase and climb. At the top, the light still turns, steady, faithful, unbroken. You stand beside it, hand resting on the glass, watching the beam stretch over the waves. Somewhere out there, maybe just beyond sight, the sea breathes her name. And for the first time since you arrived, the silence feels whole. Not lonely, not empty, just whole. The story settles here, in the rhythm of the sea and the turning of the light. You can feel your body slowing, breath sinking with the pulse of the waves, the keeper's voice, the whisper of her handwriting, the hum of the lantern. They all fade gently into the soft edges of memory. The lighthouse stands eternal, its glow spilling into the night, its beam touching faraway waters you'll never see. Somewhere a gull cries once, then quiets. The fire downstairs sighs into its final ember. Every sound softens until only the sea remains. That endless heartbeat of the world, steady and low. You think of her message again. Keep tending the quiet. It needs company. Maybe that's what love truly is. The patience to listen for someone in silence, even after they're gone. To keep showing up, keep the light burning, and trust that somewhere, someone sees it. The world outside your window slows. The air thickens with calm, the waves, the light, the silence. They all fold gently into one another, wrapping you in a soft, steady peace. You breathe in, feel the quiet take shape inside you, and breathe out everything else. Sleep now. The light will keep turning.